כל הצדיקים. הקדוש ברוך הוא בעזרת השם will bless each and every one of the צדיקים and the entire קהילה. וברכה והצלחה, סייעתא דשמיא גדולה, מלכא דרמית וחתם ויזכה אתכם, ובזכות כל הצדיקים שהקדוש ברוך הוא ישמע את כל תפילותיכם וימלא את כל משעות לבכם לטובה, אמן כן יהי רצון בעזרת השם. As we know, רבותיי, right now we are in a very special month. A month that is not a month that we sit down and we think, and a month of reflection necessarily, but a month of ma'aseh. A month where we all need to get up and we need to get ourselves involved in action. Where this is not a month where we are allowed to sit down to debate how we're going to act, when we're going to act, when we have time to act. The month of Elul is a month of ma'aseh. And that is why we actually start the month of Elul by praying what? Akitzur Nirdamim. Where Chazal tell us about the month of Elul, that we all have the obligation to wake up from our sleep. Throughout the entire year, we're all busy in our world, we're all busy in our day-to-day life, we're all busy in our endeavors, we're all busy in trying to do 1,000 things. In the month of Elul, we are not allowed to be in that form of sleeping, of being in this mode. We need to wake up and we need to be conscious of what we are about to stand in front of on Rosh Hashanah and on Yom Kippur. And that's actually the first sentence that we start Slichot with. Ben Adam Alecha Nirdam. What does that mean? Ben Adam, person, wake up. You're not allowed to be in this form of sleeping in this month of Elul. The month of Elul is when we wake up from our sleep. We start to do our teshuvah and we act b'ma'aseh. We act in action. And that is how we are able to come to a place of true redemption and of true success in this month by doing action, by awakening ourselves b'teshuvah. You know, Abatai, when we hear this sentence, that we hear so often, throughout every single month of Elul, we have to do b'teshuvah, we have to wake up b'teshuvah, we have to wake up b'teshuvah. A lot of the times you have this question of, what act can we do that will truly symbolize our teshuvah and truly wake us up, like what the Pasuk says, Akitzur Nirdamim, that we will wake up suddenly with this desire to be awake and to come close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But what can we do to be this form of an action that will take us out of this sleep, that makes us dwell in whatever we are dwelled in our dreams throughout the entire year. So Chazal teaches us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu actually put a trufa for us. He actually put in the month of Elul, like a medicine, a cure, where this cure will naturally wake us all up and give us the desire from the first place to come close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to do teshuvah, to fulfill ourselves in action. What is it? So the Rambam says it is the act. It is the act of the shofar. Where the shofar that we blow every single Rosh Chodesh Elul and throughout the entire month of Elul is the main force that wakes us up to the teshuvah. Now, Abutai, we thought about this very deeply on what is this concept of the shofar. As we know, shofar is a horn. That we hear many different types of horns throughout the year. What is so special of the shofar that wakes us up like no other action or thing that possibly exists to come close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? In order to understand how the shofar wakes us up to teshuvah, we have to understand what is teshuvah from the first place. The Zohar HaKadosh says, the Gemaras and the Midrashim, they teach us that teshuvah is not just a man taking upon himself a decision that was done wrong. So maybe we can give an analogy. There's like a person that came forward and he got upset. And he picked up a cup and he broke the cup. And now the cup is broken. In order for himself to repair that action, it's not just understanding that you shouldn't throw a cup on the floor. It's the understanding that what? That you shouldn't get upset from the first place that caused you to break the cup. With teshuvah is not just a conclusion of an act that was done. We all can conclude that the bad act is a bad act and the good act is a good act. It's the concept of understanding what caused us to do the act and repairing that. And if we can come to a place where we repair the root of our sin, then we can hold upon ourselves that, look, we did teshuvah. We repaired a certain aspect of our world or a certain aspect of ourselves, which was pagum. And that, Rabotah, is actually the essence of teshuvah. Searching for the root of our sins and tearing them. And when a person tears the root of our sins, as a result of that, the tree and the branches and the leaves and the fruit and all what's hanging on the tree, all comes what? Comes to a place of collapse. And in order to understand that, maybe we can give a story, a very, very well-known story, with the Baal Shem Tov, where one time he wanted to teach his students the explanation of the pasuk, where it says, Al tiskor lanu avonot roshanim, where whenever we do the selichot, we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu to forgive us, we mention this pasuk, we say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, just don't forget our first sins. What is the essence of this? What is the explanation of this? So Baal Shem Tov one day wanted to explain this to his students in a manner where he could understand. So the Baal Shem Tov came up with an idea. He said, I'm not going to allow my students to just I'll explain it to them for them to understand. I want to do an action, and with this action, it will be engraved in their mind. So the Baal Shem Tov took his students and he said, let's travel. And they took a wagon, they started to travel towards the forest, and they went deep and deep and deep. After this deep travel, they went 3 days without knowing if they're going right, if they're going left, with no direction of a city, with no goal of direction, with no destination at all. After 3 days, Baal Shem Tov stops, and what does he say? He says, right here, there is a job that we have to do very, very important. The Baal Shem Tov walks in front of a big stone, big rock. He picks up the rock and he flips it. Suddenly, after there is the rock flipped, the students see that under the rock there is what? A big frog. So the student said, Baal Shem Tov came all the way here for a frog? So suddenly Baal Shem Tov said, bring me some water and some bread. So immediately Baal Shem Tov, he took the water, did tilat yadayim, washed his hands, did the bracha, took the bread and did the motzi. Right after he finished the bracha of motzi, did bakat hamazon, they look at the frog and the frog is dead. So the students said, I don't understand. You came here to find the frog, to do a motzi, and then it dies. What's the goal of this? What was the purpose of all this? So the Baal Shem Tov told the middle story. He said, one time, hundreds of years ago, there was a man which he was a tzaddik. And this man one day was hungry, and they served him bread. And this man, from as much as he was tarud, he was busy and he was mentally occupied with other things, he took the bread and he ate it and he didn't do it netilat yadayim. Baal Shem Tov said, because of that sin of not doing netilat yadayim, his neshama came back as a reincarnation as this frog, and that frog has been sitting here for 500 years. So the students, they looked at Baal Shem Tov, they said, Rab, for not doing netilat yadayim one time, a neshama gets sent for 500 years in Gilgul after Gilgul, reincarnation after reincarnation, to be in the form of a frog? Where is the sense of coming back as a frog for not doing it the other time once? So Baal Shem Tov said, no. We have to understand how HaKadosh Baruch Hu constructs sins. And this is actually a part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's rachmanut, kindness and mercifulness towards us. HaKadosh Baruch Hu could have taken sins and built them like everything in the world, placed them out flat. But in that manner, it would mean that what? That every single sin will need what? Its own specific tikkun, its own specific kapara, and its own specific job. If we had the obligation to search for every single sin that we did, and to do teshuvah for every single sin, we could imagine how it would be nearly impossible for us to repair all those sins. And as a man knows, you cannot go to Gan Eden if you hold sins in your pocket. So how could it be that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created this world in a way that it's nearly impossible for a man to fix his sins 20, 30 years ago? So Zohar HaKadosh says when HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the format of how he counts sins per person, he created them in a manner of stacking. Where what? Where the first sin that a person committed, that is the sin that is charged. And that sin maybe caused another sin, caused another sin, caused another sin, caused another sin. But all the sins, they lean on what? They lean on the first one. Where the first one is the root. It's the platform. It's the foundation. Where in that manner, HaKadosh Baruch Hu put in man the ability of just understanding his core of where he went wrong as an individual. Repairing that core, and as a result of that, the man doesn't need to go searching for each sin. He pulls out the roots. The tree falls. He destroys the foundation of what caused him to sin. The building will collapse. The Zohar HaKadosh says that's how HaKadosh Baruch Hu organized man's merit of Chas Shalom, damage of sin, in a matter of stacking it. Where a man is charged, what? Only for the first Avera that dragged him to do the second, and the third, and the fourth, and the fifth. And that's what we say. Avera, goreret, Avera. A sin that a person does, what? Drags him to do another one. In what sense? In the manner that it's stacked one on the other. Baal Shem Tov said, he taught his students, man is not charged for all the sins that he committed in his life. He's charged for the root itself. This man, after he didn't do Netilat Yadayim for his bread, he ended up not doing Amotzi the next time. And then after that, stole the bread that he ate without doing Bracha at all. And then after that, he started to live from stolen bread. And then he realized that there was no more concept of being honest. So started doing crooked business in every other corner. And as a result of that, one time that he didn't do Netilat Yadayim, he was sent to do what? He was sent as all these Gilgulim in the form of a frog. To repair, or in other words, to destroy one foundation of sin that he created for himself. And that's why we say, Al tiskor lanu avonot rishonim. We say on Rosh Hashanah and all throughout all the Slichot, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, all my other sins, it doesn't matter, forgive them, don't forgive them, leave them alone. The first sins that I did, those I want you to forget. Because if you forget those sins, the entire sin that those sins caused, as a repercussion, will all be diminished and will be completely erased. And that is how the sins are actually formed on an individual. Where in order for one to do teshuvah, it's not just looking at the sin and saying, it's a sin. It's obvious it's a sin. It's that man reaching to the root of what caused him to sin and repairing it. If we could repair the root of what caused us to do wrong from the first place, then we can come to a place of purifying ourselves and being ready for Rosh Hashanah. And that is what Rabotai we call true teshuvah. And that is what we all need to come to a place of reaching to our own application of soul, within our own personal life. But now, Rabotai, we're not talking about each individual. Now we're talking about the general word of teshuvah and the general concept of sin itself, and the root of all sin, period. Because if we can find the root of all sin, like what we just said, and we could work on repairing that root, then as a result of that, we could even bring a refuah, bring a healing, bring a purification to all sins, where the root is what holds the entire tree up. In order to understand what teshuvah is truly, as a general concept, we have to look what was the root of sin, period. So in order to understand that, we have to go all the way back. All the way back to who? All the way back to the story, as we know, of Adam in what? In the Nachash. So as we know, Abotai, what the Torah taught us in Bereshit, Adam Arishon didn't yazam, he didn't lizom. He didn't lizom. הוא לא יזם. He didn't act first. You can call it initiate. He didn't initiate the sin. Where there was a root of the sin that came from another place. Where is that other place? The Nachash, the snake. And the snake, Abotai, is a true character that we need to understand. Because if we understand the Nachash, we'll understand Yitzhara period. The Gemara says, and he asks a question about how the Torah describes the snake. So the Torah says that the snake was a very special animal. Wherefore it was Arum. Or in other words, what does Arum mean? He was not dressed. The Gemara says, we don't understand why the Torah goes out of his way to say and to mention that the snake was not dressed. As we know, all animals at that time, including even Adam Arishon, didn't even have a concept of being dressed or not being dressed. So why specifically this word Arum is given to the snake as a describing of what the snake was? So Chazal answers in a very, very simple manner. The word Arum, it does not necessarily speaking about the actual translation, which is not dressed, but is the root word of the word what? Armumi. Well, what does Armumi mean? Sly, tricky, unhonest, where it's like, we give an example throughout Sifrei Musar as Armumi being like a fox, very sly, very sneaky, knows how to get his way into places. The Nachash was one of the few creations, or one of the first creations, that had a pgam, and that pgam was the sin of Armumiyut, of being sly. Where that was actually the sin that the Nachash itself, the snake itself, brought to fruition, and that's what he was punished for. Whereas we know, what did the snake do? He didn't go straight to Adam and make him sin. He said, how can I cause Adam to fall? I'm going to go to Chava. I'm going to hide behind Chava. I'm going to send Chava to go to Adam. And because Chava is close to Adam, then Adam is going to trust Chava and it's going to fall into place. Where the root of the sin of Adam came essentially from the root of the sin of the Nachash. The root of the sin of the Nachash was what? The sin of Armamiyut. This attribute of being sly. That is why the Gemara calls Nachash what? It said he was wearing what? He was Hakim Labish. He didn't wear clothing because he was an animal, but he wore something else. He wore knowledge. But that knowledge that he wore, he didn't direct it in the path of productivity, of taking that knowledge to a good place. He took this Hakim, this Chokhmah, this knowledge, and he directed it in what? In this attribute of like being sly, like being sneaky. The Zohar Kadosh says that was the first sin, which was the main movement that caused Adam Arishon to sin from the first place. Essentially, the Armumiyut, the slyness, was the trait that brought the snake and Adam to a place of what? Of being pagum, of having like a blemish. Zohar Kadosh teaches us that the first tikkun that must come to man was also the first kilkul, the first destruction that came to man too. Which was what? It was this concept of Armamiyut, of being sly. And we truly see this with Adam Arishon right after this. Adam Arishon saw HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Umala haaretz kevodo. He knows that HaKadosh Baruch Hu filled all the earth. Adam Arishon wanted to be grown up. He didn't want to be tamim. He didn't want to be like all the other creations that existed, walking in their path, in their direction. He wanted to be chacham. After seeing HaKadosh Baruch Hu, after knowing the Emet, after seeing the Shekhinah, after living in Gan Eden, the moment after he sinned, what does Adam do? He realized that he is, well, the Torah says he is Aharon, which Aharon comes from the word of what? being sly. And what does Adam do? He hides from Hashem. How are you hiding from HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Didn't you see HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Don't you know how HaKadosh Baruch Hu functions in the world? Why are you hiding from HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Zohar HaKadosh says, because the snake installed in him what? He installed in him this concept of armimut, of being sly, of losing his simplicity, of losing his naiveness, of losing his ability to just follow in a simple manner without seeking what? Knowledge. Without seeking a growth that does not belong to him. The sin that caused Adam to sin with the tree of knowledge was the desire of knowledge itself. The desire of wanting to be something smarter, something more clever, something that nobody asked Adam HaRishon to reach to from the first place. And that is actually a big thing that we can all do inyan, or you can call it a yesod, that we can all learn from this, even apply in our own world. There is a specialty and there is a great value in the attribute of simplicity, of not seeking something which is above our ability. There is a big value of walking in our path, of walking in our mesila, walking in our tracks, and not trying to be smarter, not trying to be arumin, especially with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we can truly understand this from this being the main force that even caused Adam, being the smartest creation, Yetzir Kapav de Kutsha Berechu, the creation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's fingers, to a place to reach to the bottom of the bottom of the bottom. Tikkun of man, reparation of man, starts with what? Starts with tmimut. Starts with being naive. Starts with being simple. Starts without asking ourselves too many questions. Starts without asking everybody else too many questions. It starts with us understanding our place in being bishlemut, being at peace, in being content on where we stand. Many people can see this to be as a big downfall. Being, you can call it maybe less fast or less clever. But there is truly a bracha and truly a presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that lies in this place of having tmimut, of having pashtut, of having simplicity. We heard a story this week from somebody that was very, very close with our grandfather, from the family Weitzman. And unfortunately, this tzaddik passed away 2 days ago. And that's why the story was told. But it truly can give us an example of what even caused tzaddikim to reach to such a high level. The root of it being the ability of standing in complete simplicity in tmimut with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There was a story of this man, that was a big help of our grandfather, Rabbi Moshe Pinto, big help to our grandfather, when Rabbi Moshe moved from Morocco to Eretz Israel. So when they moved to Eretz Israel, our grandmother, told our grandfather that she does not want to live in Yerushalayim. She was stuck on the fact she wants to go to Ashdod and not to Yerushalayim. So Rabbi Moshe, being a good Pinto, a good husband, he told his wife, Amen, that we're going to go to Yerushalayim. So to Ashdod. So our grandfather heard that there is one of his students that lived in Morocco, that moved to Ashdod, and now have a big house in Ashdod. So Rabbi Moshe had an idea. He said, the Rabbanit wants right now us to move to Ashdod, and the Sochnut at the time didn't want to give them homes in Ashdod. So the idea was, we're going to stay at the house of Weitzman until the Sochnut will give us our homes, and then we'll continue to live in Ashdod. When they arrived to Ashdod, our grandmother, the first thing that she did, and it's something apparently that our father told us was a custom, where our grandfather for 40 years never left his house, but every few days she would write a list of shopping. And she would give it to him and say, figure it out. Now how would he figure it out, being that he never left the house for 40 years? The amount of miracles that come from these stories is above the nature. So when they arrived to Ashdod, now it's a Weitzman, our grandmother wanted to start cooking. So she wrote a big list to Rabbi Moshe. She said, Rabbi Moshe, take this list and somehow give it to me. Flour, eggs, meat, chicken, fish. So Rabbi Moshe looked at the list. Never been to a shopping place in his life. Never been to Ashdod in his life. He said, how am I going to find this list? So he went to the Baal Habayit and he called him. And he was, I forgot his name, one of the tzaddikim of Mishpachat Weizmann. He said, take this list, go to a shopping center somewhere. There's another man that I know. Go to meet him, give him the list. So the tzaddik from the Weizmann family, he looked at the list and he said, who's going to buy all this for you? So he said, it's this man named this and this. He says, where does he live? Where is his store? Where am I going? He says, I don't know. So the tzaddik from the Weizmann family, he said, okay, so how do you expect me to get there? He said, you have a bicycle? So the man said, yes. He said, take the bicycle and drive. When the wheel will pop, look to your left, that's the store. Walk into that store, give him the list. That man, he had a choice in that moment, either to think Rabbi Moshe lost his mind, because this makes no sense in any level of machshava, of logic, or you can call it brilliance, sechlut, sechel, or you can hold complete tmimut, complete simplicity in the way of thought, and follow the will of the tzaddik. So the tzaddik from Mishpachat Weizmann said, we're going to follow the tzaddik's will. He took the list, went on his bike, and he started riding. He was riding, doing circles. I'm circling the city, and I'm not finding where I'm supposed to go. And suddenly, boom, his wheel pops. He looks to his left and he sees a box, like some sort of a basket, with a man sitting on it. So he came to this man and he said, this is a list that Rabbi Moshe gave me. Do you know Rabbi Moshe is? So he looked at him. He said, how did you find me? So this man said, Rabbi Moshe told me to take a bike, to ride. When the wheel will pop, I know I'm here. This Abotai was the simplicity, and you can call it the naiveness, that great tzaddikim were able to reach. This naiveness wasn't just a trait of their character. It is a part, and a vital part, of tikkun, of reparation, of all man with regard to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Where, like we said in the Torah, Tamim tiyeh im Hashem Elokecha. Our job and our tikkun, reparation in this world, is finding this root that caused Adam to sin from the first place, which was being smart, being clever, and bringing that to him. And when we can come to a place of truly being naive and having a simple way of thought and walking HaKadosh Baruch Hu with complete simplicity, we can come to a place of truly reaching presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Like what it was before Adam sinned, when there was Tmimut, there was presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzaddikim that walk with Tmimut have presence of who? Have presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Our grandfather, Rabbi Moshe told us, he said, he sat hours and hours with Rabbi Lubavitch. He said, when you would talk to Rabbi Lubavitch about business, about worldly manners, he was a brilliant brain. Whoever knows, Rabbi Lubavitch, he was a mandes, whatever that is in English. He was a mandes, very, very smart man. The moment you start to talk about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he sounded like what? He sounded like a child, a simple person, believing in HaKadosh Baruch Hu without questions, walking in HaKadosh Baruch Hu paths without questions, complete simplicity within the way he thought with regard to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Our tikkun to reach to being complete with ourselves, being complete with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in achieving presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is us coming to a place of being simple. And it's actually something that we all could relate to. It's actually something that we could all look at as a part of time when we stood, that we actually dwelled in this attribute. We're talking about what? We're talking about the times we all had when we were children. When we were children, as a child, you are completely pure. You love without reason. You don't hate without reason. You forgive even though somebody hurt you. You don't make a difference between one another. You are happy for yourself as you are happy for others. When a person is a child, he's what? He is complete. And he is complete with all and every single aspect of man. When a person is a child, he doesn't have that arminut, that slyness that us adults have. A child is completely pure. A child holds no grudge. A child sees no hate. A child sees no bad. But that simplicity also causes them to be what? Not only to live lives that even us, regardless of what lives we have now, we look back at our children, at our years of children, at childhood, and we see how beautiful they were. And we see how perfect they were. And we see how pure children are. When we are children, we are at that state of what? Not, you can call it simplicity in our mind with nothing smart, but simplicity in how we perceive the world and how we perceive ourselves. But that root of going back to how each and every one of us were when we were kids is actually something that is very, very prominent throughout the Torah Kedusha. It's not something that maybe we hear from motivational speakers of don't grow up, but actually something that exists within the Yahadut, within the Judaism, as a core value. We're returning to our years as a child is the essence of how we reach to purity, like to tzidkut from the first place. The Zohar HaKadosh says, and we know this from many places, that in Yom Kippur, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted, when the Kohen wanted HaKadosh Baruch Hu to forgive Bnei Israel, what would he do? He would enter into Kodesh HaKodashim, he would do the Ketoret, and he would do most of the Avodah in front of what? In front of both of the Kruvim. Kruvim? The Kruvim. The two angels that were facing one another when there was Shalom. And there's a word for English, but it does not matter where Lashon HaKodesh is a superior Baruch Hashem. Most of the Avodah, bringing a reparation to Am Yisrael, had to involve what? The Kruvim. Why the Kruvim? Zohar HaKadosh says because the essence of reaching to a complete chapara, or the essence of bringing Bnei Israel to a place where they are judged like they did a complete teshuvah, is bringing Bnei Israel to what? Bringing them to a place where they were tinokim. Bringing Bnei Israel and making them pass betin shel mala, allowing them to pass the room of judgment as what? Like children. Like pure creations that have no bad, or in other words, have no mumut. That take their knowledge and take their ability to understand in a very simple, positive manner. The Zohar HaKadosh says that is the root of Teshuvah. It's reaching a level of Tmimut. And only when we reach a level of Tmimut, when we bring ourselves back to our years of children, or childhood, only then we can truly come to a place of walking in a path where we're pulling out all the root of all the sin, which is this concept of slyness, and coming to a place of allowing ourselves to do a complete teshuvah to our core. But you know, Abotai, this concept of armiyut, being sly, actually has a big effect of man, not just on the level of teshuvah, but even on a day-to-day level of his life. Like we mentioned a moment ago, when a person is a kid, he has one thing which is very, very prominent, something we can all relate to. And that is his ashkafa, his view on the world, regardless of what he's seen and what he's been through, will always be perceived in what? Will always be perceived from a vision, from a perspective of what? Of shlimut, of complete happiness. Where, like we mentioned, we could have all had good childhood, we could have had hard childhood. Every child sees his father as the best father. Each child sees his father as the strongest man that exists in the world. Each child sees his family as the best people that could exist. Who will judge your sibling? A child, when he's pure and he holds tmimut, not only that it gives them a big advantage of strength from a spiritual aspect, but it even gives them a tool, something that is so powerful that throughout our entire lives we carry without even understanding why. And even though sometimes it goes against our logic. And that is what? And that is the ability to perceive the world in regardless of what exists, what doesn't exist, what we have and what we don't have, but being in complete content and the complete happiness with what it was at that time. We all think about Abotai, our childhood, and we say they were the good days of happiness. They were the days where man had no stress. There were the days where everything seemed perfect. That perfection that we perceive, that we hold our entire lives like gold, was a result of a simple act. It was a result of children holding the midah of tmimut as their tashtit, as their platform of how they absorb the world and how they digest the world. And that's what gives all of us that fantasy that our childhood was so perfect. Because in our eyes at that time it was perfect. Zohar Kadosh says that is actually a fight that exists already between Bnei Israel and between the Satan for years. Where the Satan wants us to grow up. Where when we grow up, we lose our simcha. We lose our happiness. We lose our energy. We lose our ability to see things in a positive manner. That is where the Satan truly fights a person every single day of his life. The Zohar Kadosh says that is the fight between Yaakov and between Esav. As we know, Abotai, it says in the Torah, Ve'esav soneh liYaakov. Esav always hates Yaakov. Esav will always try to harm Yaakov. What is the difference between Yaakov and Esav? Yaakov and Esav were twins. They were in the same stomach, they came from the same blood, they came from the same father. What was so different within both of them that caused Esav to have this anger, this hate towards Yaakov? So as we know, Abotai, when Esav was born, the Torah witnesses the first thing on him. Esav was what? He was red, but he was also what? Hairy. Where his name, Esav, comes from what word? From the fact that he had already hair, like what? Like an adult. Where Esav's core, when he was born, the moment he was born, he already held what? He held that attribute of the snake. Which that attribute of the snake is what? It's the attribute of being smart. It's the attribute of being older. It's the attribute of being begadlut. What's begadlut? Someone that does not hold tmimut. Someone that doesn't hold that naive specialty that a child holds. Esav was born, and from the moment he was born, it is kistzayid befiv. Where already in his mouth he had what? His mouth was his weapon. He was smart. He was sly. He had that attribute of armamiut, like the snake, like no other man had. As we know, as a result of that, we could see throughout Esav's life, we have this concept of Esav always being hungry. Esav never being happy. Esav always wanting to harm Yaakov. Why? So why? What did Yaakov have that's so special that Esav hates so much? So it says, Yaakov tam yoshev oalim. What does that mean? The Torah summarized Yaakov in a sentence. Yaakov is not wealthy, he's not smart, he's not strong, he's not capable, he's not anything. He's Ish. Tam, Yoshev Alim. He's a simple man that is naive. Tam comes from the word Tmimut, which is the word naive. He was a simple man, that he was naive. He sat in tents all his life. He was a simple person. He didn't need meat. He didn't need furs and leathers. He needed lentils. He needed the simple thing that they could know. But that simplicity that he had always gave him the ability to look at the world in what manner? To look at the world and to find complete shlemut of every aspect. Zohar Kadosh says that's even why Yaakov wrote Arvit. As we know, the forefathers, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, our forefathers, they put together the three tefillot of Shacharit, Mincha, and Arvit. Shacharit being Abraham, Mincha being Yitzchak, Yaakov being Arvit. Arvit, the Zohar Kadosh says, comes from the word Irvuv. Well, what is Irvuv? Irvuv is confusion. Where it's nighttime, so technically it's time of din, but even though there's time of din, you could do tefillah, it's a time where there is bilbul in the world. But even though there was that bilbul, with the tmimut, with the simplicity that Yaakov held, he was able to take even that time of bilbul and to make what out of it? To make shlemut, to make something complete. And that's what gave Yaakov this ability, not just to live a life with presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, where we are named after him. We're not named Bnei Yitzchak, Bnei Avraham. We're named Bnei Israel, which is Bnei Yaakov. It came from a result of being so simple in his manner that he was able to bring such presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu also gave him the ability to live a happy life like no other forefather existed. And we really see that Abotai, of this concept of Yaakov being complete, when he meets Esav. When he meets Esav, Yaakov looks at Esav, and what did he tell Esav? He said, you know Esav, I have everything. I have everything that exists in the world. When Esav heard this, the Zohar Kadosh says that Esav answered to Yaakov, you have everything, but I have a lot. Now, as we know, Esav at that time had soldiers, had countries, had land, had gold, had avadim, had slaves. He had everything. One sees what he has as a lot, and one sees what he had as what? As everything. Yaakov reached to a place of tmimut, of simplicity, of reaching to a place of like a child. And where that's why we even have Yaakov in two different forms. We have Yaakov, which is katnut, and we have Esav, which is gadlut, which that's an entire different shul, which we're not even going to get into bichlal. Yaakov reached to a place of such shlemut in his pshitut, in his simplicity with Ba'avodat HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that regardless of what he had, he was happy like no other man in existence. He was b'shlemut. And that shlemut came from the root of being what? From the root of being tam. Something that Esav didn't have. Something that Esav tried to take away from Yaakov Avinu Alav Shalom. Where we know that Yaakov had a bowl of lentils. What do you want? He said that he was tired from hunting meat. Why do you want lentils? Why are you taking Yaakov's lentils? He wanted to take something that he couldn't even have his hands to reach. And that was the happiness, the shlemut, that Yaakov held, not with brilliancy, but with tmimut, with simplicity. And that is why, Rabotai, each man needs to try and seek his years of when he was young. Because when a person lives with his years of when he was young, when he was a child, and he's able to try to bring that way of perceiving the world, he could essentially turn his world overnight to a perfect world. He can essentially turn his life overnight to a perfect life, where it could be, regardless of where he stands and when he stands, a person can reach to complete shlemut with what? Just with simplicity. The Satan doesn't want us to be simple. The Satan tells us, grow up. The Satan tells us, you're a big boy. If you're a big boy, you can put yourself in places of danger. And if you put yourself in places of danger, the Satan's going to change his hat to the Malacham Mavet and then come in that place and attack us there. The Satan doesn't like our years of being children. Judaism, in its core, is Tinokot Shel Bet Rabban. We are based off the kids of Am Yisrael. Not even necessarily actual kids. But when we reach to that level of being like children, when we reach to that level of being complete between it, being at peace, being happy, not looking at the world in a very smart, intelligent, sly, clever way that the world and society push us to think in that way. And essentially, that's what caused Adam Marishon to sin from the first place. You know, Adam's sin, we cover it many different times, in different aspects, and we don't want anyone to come to a thought that Adam's sin, there's like machlokot, there is arguments of what really was a sin. Adam's sin, like we say in the Torah, there are 70 different aspects to the world, to the Torah, like our lives. When a person drinks, it's not maybe just to drink, he drinks to have liquid in his body, to solve his thirst, if it's a sweet drink to solve what his mind wants. So every single thing and every single action we do has multiple different repercussions and also is driven and motivated from multiple different regions. So whenever we talk about Adam and we keep on bringing different aspects of the cause of his sin, none of them actually contradict the other. Chas v'shalom. The Shla, in the Gaon Vilna, teaches something incredible about what was the motivation of Adam's sin from the first place. They say that Adam's sin wasn't even to sin. It was something completely different. The Shla said that the Nachash came to Adam and he came with a proposal. He said, you know, Adam, right now you are very big. You are pure. But you want to now become bigger? I can teach you to grow up. I can teach you to reach even to a higher level. So, the Shla says, Adam Arishon said, how can you teach me to go up to a higher level? So he says, you know, there's this tree called Etzadat, tree of knowledge. Eat from it, and you will receive within yourself an immense knowledge. With that knowledge comes from the name, it's Hadat, Tov, Vera. But that knowledge, like what the name of the tree is, Tov, Vera, good and bad, comes with a little bit of a catch. But that catch is what's going to bring you to Gadlut, to even a higher level. What is the catch? The Shla says that the snake told Adam, he said, you know, right now, all your merits, they're based off of no Yetzer Hara. They're based off the aspect that you are good, you don't hold any bad, so that's it. The merit you get, go accordingly. But the snake said, imagine if you're going to have a Yetzer Hara. Imagine if you're going to have such a pure knowledge, where now you're going to have like a secondary entity that will fight you. Or in other words, evil inclination. Imagine the merit you're going to receive when you do God's will, when you fought and you overcame that Yetzer Hara. You will reach to higher levels of merit. Well, like we say, במקום שבעלי תשובה עומדים, אפילו צדיקים גבוהים לא עומדים, where בעלי teshuvah, people do teshuvah, stand. Even tzadikim can't stand. Because where the בעלי teshuvah comes from, it comes from the fact of overcoming a big fight against Yetzer Hara. The Shla says that Adam's sin wasn't even motivated for sin from the first place. His sin was that he wanted to gather more merit from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want us to grow. HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not need us to grow. HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs us to stay young, needs us to stay like we are when we are children. HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't need us to reach to higher levels of Gadlut, of suddenly introducing a bad inclination to higher your merit. We don't need to have a bad inclination to have a lot of merit. The sin of Adam, according to the Shla, was that he thought that if he brings within himself this evil entity, which comes with great knowledge, his merit will be increased. But who asked you for that? Who asked you to grow up in a place where you were not asked to grow up from the first place? maybe we can say that is actually one of the tikkunim, one of the corrections that HaKadosh Baruch Hu installed within the Beriah, within the world. Adam HaRishon, was he born a child? No. He was born what? An adult. Chava, was she born a child? No. She could have been born a child. She was born from Adam. She was born what? An adult. Right after the sin, who was born? Cain and Hevel. Were they born adults or child? Child. Why suddenly did this change? Why suddenly Adam, Chava, they're born adults? The kids of Adam and Chava, they're born children. Maybe we can say with a hint of the Zohar HaKadosh that Adam HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to do like a resurrection. We said man brought upon himself Chokhmah. Man brought upon himself this concept of being naked, of having armumiyut, being sly. But how will man be born sly and leave this slyness to be able to tshuva? It's impossible. If man will be born sly, he will end sly too. We have to give man a chance to have a platform of being the way the world was before the sin, bitnimut, with simplicity and with being, meaning naive, walking in the path of HaKadosh Baruch Hu without needing to be, not trying to be extra smart. And if we build the platform of that attribute, man will have the best chance, or have the most odds, of finding their path back in that way. What did HaKadosh Baruch Hu do? He installed in nature this aspect of man being born a child, being born tamim, being born naive, being born pure, being born the exact same way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created man from the first place. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the rest of our lives to try to regather that, to try to re-achieve that. It's like what we say in Zohar HaKadosh in the Midrash Yalkut Shimoni, that when a person is born when a person is in the stomach of his mother, an angel will come and teach you the entire Torah Kabbalah. Why are you teaching the entire Torah Kabbalah if you're going to make him forget it? Because if he held it once, he will have the most chance and the biggest opportunity or odds to re-achieve it again. And that is why HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us this concept of Yaldut, of childhood. Childhood did not come for no reason. Childhood gave us the platform and the blueprints of how to come to a place of complete tzidkut. But in the manner of what? From the matter of tmimut. From the matter of complete simplicity. From the matter of not trying to repeat and to re-root those roots of the snake, which are what? The armiyut. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us something we can all build off of. We are all essentially walking children that have been through a lot of fights. We did not change. The world tries to say you were young and you were naive and you were not as smart, so you have to change. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu never wanted us to change. The Satan's job is to come and to tell man, when he's young, he says, you are young, sin now to teshuvah tomorrow. When he's old, he says, you are old, you're about to die, sin now. The Satan was the one that brought in this concept of armumiyut, of making us grow. But in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's design of the world, we were always supposed to, and we are supposed to reach to a place of what? Reaching to a place of complete shlemut, of complete timimut, of complete simplicity, b'Kadosh Baruch Hu. That is why we know the prayers of which group of people are even heard more than any other group. Tinakot Shebet Rabban. Whereas we know when Haman HaRasha wanted to bring Gzerah on Am Yisrael, when he wanted to bring a big decree on Am Yisrael, what was Mordechai's cure to it? It wasn't go and pray yourself. It was cause who to pray? Cause Tinakot Shebet Rabban. Cause the children to pray. And if the children will pray, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu will guarantee hear their prayers. Why? Because of their simplicity, and they're able to to walk without any involvement of an extra knowledge that is unnecessary. In the month of Elul Rabotai, we all need to come to a place of reaching that simplicity where we could all start to walk in the path of HaKadosh Baruch Hu without asking too many questions, without being too smart. What better way of doing so than awakening something that is very young, something that is very pure, and something that is very simple. In the book of Yetzirah, which is one of the deepest books that exists, as one of the Badi Simunim, they explain the word Tkiyat Shofar. So they say shofar comes from the root of what? Comes from the root of Kol Pashut. What is Kol Pashut? A simple sound. Where when we are kids, our voices as a child is heard. As a result of what? As a result of what, Rabotai? Being a simple sound. A child, when he's praised, it could sound ridiculous to us. But that simple sound tears Shamayim and reaches straight to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The shofar represents a simple sound. It represents the voice of a child. It represents something that is at its utmost simplicity without asking too many questions. Tkiya comes from the word what? Litkoa. What is litkoa? To put in place, to place. When you want something to be permanent, what do? You took out, you install it, you make it permanent in that place. Maybe we can say that the concept of Tkiyat Shofar is something very simple. It's to remind us all that the most powerful force in this world and how we can reach to complete tshuva is returning back to our simple voices. Returning back to our simple selves. Returning back to ourselves that perceive the world as a perfect world. And if we can reach to that place of being like when we were children, of a kol pashut, of a simple voice, of not a voice of a smart man, but a voice of a very, very a naive person, and we make that voice the permanent voice, as like from the concept of tki'ah, meaning putting something in permanent. Only then we can come to a place of what? Not only doing complete teshuvah, but also having our prayers heard like a simple voice, like a tinok shel bet Rabban. And as we mentioned, the voices of tinokot shel bet Rabban are always heard. This month, Rabotai, is not a month where we become complicated. It is a month we return to our childhood and we don't ask any questions. There's a famous Gemara that for years haunted us. It says that the Gemara asks, why we do shofar? It's a question. It's a question that we asked. And the Gemara answers in one word. We do shofar because Hashem asked to do shofar. What type of an answer is that? We know that. Maybe we can say that the Gemara was here to hint us this teaching that we just taught, that when it comes up to Elul, be simple. Hashem asked us to walk in that path, be like a child. A father asked you to do something, don't ask too many questions. Return back to your simplicity and you will reach complete purity, you will reach complete happiness, you will reach complete repairing of oneself and repairing of our entire world. And with that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will give us, Hashem, the ability to dig deep into ourselves and to not allow all the Yitzhara, smart Yitzhara, make us grow up. That we will all be truly walking symbols of who we truly are within ourselves, which are vulnerable children, and to bring that out to fruition in this holiday of Rosh Hashanah, in this entire month of the Chodesh of Elul. Amen. Is there any other questions about that?
How does someone accept responsibility while still keeping to?
What do you mean, Sadiq?
For example, when somebody does grow up, after going to school and so on and so forth, they get a job, they get a family, they have to.
The month of Elul is the essence of that. The month of Elul is not necessarily a positive month, in the sense that it's positive and negative. How is it positive and negative? It's judgment. Judgment is not negative, it's not positive. Judgment could either be negative or positive, but it's not either. It's not either or. So the way you could explain it is something very simple. A child does something wrong. How do you take responsibility? The father is going to tell you. He's going to do like a judgment in the form of doing an evaluation. If you did something wrong, maybe he's going to punish you. Maybe he's going to take away a toy. Maybe he's going to do whatever you did as a form of making sure that you take responsibility. But it doesn't change how you're going to react with your father. It doesn't change how you're going to approach your father. It doesn't change how you're going to repent for your father. So they're not contradicting at all. They actually work very, very hand in hand in harmony together.
There's just more pieces of that thing.
If you reach to a place of complete tmimut, of complete simplicity in the way you think with regards to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you will take responsibility as a natural action. A child knows what is wrong, what is not wrong. Even though he's simple, he's not stupid. Ken Sadiq.
But as you mentioned, the children are born with this simplicity, but throughout the years as we grow, we have these things that prevent or make it more restricted to view through this eyes of Tmimut. What are some of the practical ways or things to do at whatever level or whatever age you might be to bring back this Tmimut?
You know, a lot of the times, Sadiq, when there's something that someone does, and we tell them, you know, he hit your car and he ran away. Maybe he was running to save his wife because she was in the hospital. So you can perceive it, look at it and say, wow, that is a ridiculous excuse. That it turns to be that maybe that was the reason. But in practicality, all what we are doing is we're trying to pull ourselves out of the equation and specifically pull our smart, naive way of thinking of how he can be sneaky and sly too. And we come to a bottom line of looking at something and seeing it for what it is. So in reality, throughout our entire life, the Satan is going to try to make us to grow up. He's going to try to cause us to become smart and sly. We just need to understand, we have to try to keep that simple mentality, that simple way of thinking. And that simplicity is what's going to bring us to the repairing of all. It's like what we mentioned. The biggest tzaddikim were the smartest people. Look at the Rambam. Smart like no other man ever. But if you read his books of Tshuva and his books of Musar, you see this man is what? He didn't ask questions, he wasn't smart, he wasn't unique. It says walk in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's path b'tzimimut. So throughout life we're going to have obstacles. We need to, each an individual, look at ourselves and try to reach to our core, because it's too of a specific thing to try to teach to a broader volume. We all need to look to ourselves, see how we perceive life, how we saw life. How come when a kid, he comes up with an idea, whether it's for business or for study, he's so optimistic, he's so happy about it? Because he pulled out this concept of being sly and being mean and having bad intentions and having this one going to do this, and why would someone do that, and why would somebody help you, and what is it for him? We have this way of thinking in a very smart, very good, smart, but negative manner. So you're smart, but you're full of negativity. So good for you.
Look at things from Kaf's foot.
From simplicity, for what they are. If someone did something wrong to you, that's fine. But if it's like a child. Somebody hurt a child. He says sorry. Are you going to remember that he hurt you? No, he said sorry. It's simplicity. Tzaddikim held simplicity to perfection. Adam HaRishon before the sin held simplicity to a perfection. Animals hold simplicity to perfection. The snake failed at that. We need to try to return to that place of simplicity. And it's different for each individual. But that's what we mentioned. The secret is looking into ourselves. Go back in time. Think about when you were a kid. All the dreams you had, all the thoughts you had, how you saw the world, how you knew that if you did wrong you will be punished, how you look at the child, the child says, Abba, if I do wrong, is Hashem not going to be happy with me? And you look and you say, wow, that's beautiful. But in your subconscious, it's because he's not smart. But in reality, we should say, I wish to be like him. We think in that path of Tmimut. And look how happy he is. Give him a candy, he's happy. He will smile like there is no tomorrow. So you can laugh at his simplicity, but he's smiling. And it's one attribute, it's not 100, it's one. And a man just needs to try to install it in one aspect in his life. And if he can install it in one aspect in his life, of just being simple in one place, whether it's Parasha, whether it's Zivug, whether it's Fu'ah, whether it's whatever it is, Emunah, it will eat everything up. Because if you're going to see that it's working in one place, you're going to start applying it. To live a happier, better life for yourself, even put aside tshuva and coming close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ken Tzadika.
First of all, thank you so much.
Shila Tzadika.
Thank you so much for tonight. I really appreciate it. And I think you mentioned, I mean, if I understood you correctly, you mentioned that it's important for us, or we get punished based off of our first sin. How could we discover what our first sin is?
So it's not about we get punished, it's we are held accountable.
Oh, yeah, okay.
We're held accountable. So, like everything we're held accountable, it's like a person is driving and he drink, and he destroyed 3 trees. You're not going to be charged per tree.
Right.
You're going to be charged for what you did,
Yes.
that you drove and you drink. So we're held accountable. We all have general roots of sins, like what you mentioned, like this one, being our lack of simplicity. But we all need to look within ourselves to try to find our own root of sin. So, for example, for some men, it could be a man that sins with brit. Okay, so he's sinning a brit. How can he stop it? When he knows to sin the brit is asur, he knows he's not allowed to. So he could say, okay, maybe what causes that man to sin the brit in the first place is sadness of Parasha, because you have no emunah of Parasha. So the no emunah makes you sad. That sadness gives you an emptiness, a halal, a void within yourself, and that void you want to fill, and you fill it up with quick, short-term happiness. So that's how you found the root. For another person, it could be having a problem with his shalom bayit. So he knows, okay, what's the problem with his shalom bayit? Maybe it's because I have an anger problem. So that anger problem causes me to say wrong things. What causes me to say wrong things? So that's the root. Every individual needs to look at himself. We all know what we're doing wrong. Nobody sits down and thinks he's perfect. Whoever thinks he's perfect, kol hakavod. That's a lot of bitachon, kol hakavod. Nobody thinks to himself, I am perfect. So we all know our flaws. In one moment, a person can tell you what his flaws are. We just need to have the audacity to stand up to them. 5 years ago, there was a young boy that till today, every single Rosh Hashanah, we try to copy what he did. It's nearly impossible. It was Erev Yom Rosh Hashanah, Erev Yom Kippur, Erev Rosh Hashanah, and we gave a shul Torah about, it was the concept of it was Chizuk, trying to bring people to awaken them. So we spoke about this idea of you can't heal yourself unless you don't know what the sickness is. It's like when you go to a doctor, he's not going to give you medicine. There's millions of medicines. So he's going to first prescribe you. He's going to put an exact location of what the problem is. And once you know what the problem is, then you could attack it and heal it. So we can't do tshuva until we know what the problem is. We can't, a person that drinks and doesn't recognize that he drinks, he'll never stop. A person that's upset is too prideful to say that I'm not upset. So you're not going to calm down because in your head you're not upset. So after 2 days later, he came to us with a piece of paper. He said, Rav, that night, I sat down And I wrote all the sins that I did this year. And I wanted to give it to you, Rav, and I want you to tell me one by one what I could do to fix it. We looked at him and Be'emunah, we had nothing to tell him. We said, first of all, what a tzaddik. To sit down and to write every single sin that he did throughout the year, and it was the page. It wasn't, you give a Rav, or you give even whoever you give, doesn't matter, a piece of paper to write your sins. He's going to write one line. He's going to leave it empty. Look, that's what I can think of. He mamash filled up a page. I'm looking at the page and saying, Ribbon Alayim, what do I do with this page? So we looked and we said, Tzaddik, first of all, I want to say guarantee. All what's written on this paper, Hashem forgave you. That's 100%. Because the fact that you were able to sit down and to write all the wrong things that you did this year, you have to have mamash koach, you have to have strength. You have to have courage. It's strength. It's the deepest vulnerability, which is strength in its core. So he said, you know what, Tzaddik, I don't want to see this page. That page, we want you to keep it, fold it, keep it in your wallet. Never take it out of your wallet. This page should be a page that you should hold it with you every single day of your life for you to know to hold this lesson that you learned. And that night we sat down, we tried to write. To try to copy what he did. It's impossible. Because you give yourself excuses. No, this wasn't the sin really. I had excuse for that. I did that because of this and because of that. I really was helping that one, but in order to help, I had to do this wrong. So we give ourselves these excuses and we make up stories. You stole, no, because you needed to eat. It was pikuach nefesh. You did this because of this. You did that because of this. So if we're able to stand up, first of all, to our sin from the first place, and we're able to recognize that this is the sin that we did. As long as we're able to do so, we just have to track, okay, what caused me to do so? What's the root of it? And it's very simple, mamash simple. And if you can reach to the root of that, we have to use our chokhmah that we got from that tree, that silly tree. It's a dat. We have to take something from that silly tree and use it for good. So let's use that knowledge as a force of recognizing what our root is. And once we find the root, we destroy it all. It says in Zohar Kadosh, AT RABBI, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to take that tree, and in the Zohar says he will tear its roots out of the ground and he's going to burn it in Gehenna. So we need to do the same thing. We need to pull out the roots of that chokhmah, of that etzadat, tovera, and burn it in Gehenna. Let's send that to Gehenna. We want to stay in Gan Eden. And we can all do it on our own individual way. Ken Tzedika. We don't understand, Tzedika, what is the question?
So the question is, if we're going to classes, we're getting more knowledge, yes? But we actually need to stay.
There's a difference of having, it's like we spoke about one time about being about being content with our spirituality. We need to be content with our spirituality. If one's not content with his spirituality, he's going to lose what he's holding. Tough? So you can say, well, if you're content, how are you growing? One has nothing to do with the other. A man is built from a heart, liver, blood, bones. We're not built from one thing, so we can do multiple things too. We're not blank pieces of white paper that it's this or nothing. We are agile in our nature. So the concept of studying of Torah is, yes, it's understanding our Torah and being able to give a home for this Torah. Especially when we have already Yetzirah in our mind. We think that the biggest obstacle for this generation is not going to be their lack of knowledge. It's going to be their over knowledge. And that over knowledge will cause them to overthink, Overthinking will cause them to go down dark paths that have no return from. So, in reality, there is a Yetzer Hara already in our mind. So we have to fight that Yetzer Hara, but we also have to find a way to tear its core out. And that's reaching B'Tmimut. So even if you have B'Tmimut, you can be the smartest man in the world, but you will still walk B'Tmimut, like what the Tzaddikim did. So we need to come to have Torah to, number one, strengthen our mind with Kedusha, to fight all that shtiyot we have in our mind already from Yetzer Hara. But that doesn't mean that we have to live in a very smart and clever way. We don't need to be clever with our lives. The simple things are what bring us true sustenance and happiness in Shefa. People work years upon years and put millions upon millions for technology and all that stuff, and then they say to go to rest, to be calm, they go to a place where man didn't touch, a lake. You spent all your life to achieve one thing, and then you go to a lake to be happy. Stay in the lake all your life. Stay in the lake. You'll be happy all your life. You don't need to go to the lab and this and that and that. Stay in the lake. It's as simple as that. So, one does not contradict the other.
But there is sometimes that desire that you have, that you want to grow, you want to learn, you want to accomplish.
No, you have to want to learn. Tzadika, again, you're not allowed to not want. If you not want to learn, then you are a chair. You're not allowed to be silly. You have to want to learn to grow. But it doesn't mean that's how you function. A child learns information, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, without changing the way he perceives the world. Information and how we digest our world are two different things. You can be a smart person but digest the world in a clean, simple manner. Pure manner. It doesn't lachlok one another. It's not information that turn all of us into these skeptical, judgeful, grudgeful people. It's growing up and becoming more experienced, and all these words that we use for ourselves. But information and achieving does not make us sly. That's b'chalalo. Nothing to do. That's a complete false, like thing that the Satan could make us perceive. B'chalalo. Information, achievement, are very important.
Because when you achieve, you are not content. You keep wanting to achieve.
No, not true. Like we said, you give the child a candy, he'll be happy with it. He achieved the candy, he's happy with the candy. Now if you're going to make him rotten, you're going to say, I have a better candy for you. I have a bigger candy for you. I have something much more unique, something more knowledgeable, something better. That's how you decay a child. It's the simplicity of how we digest our world.
So it's like basically experiencing life and
In a simple manner.
in a simple manner, the power of the Munah that is everything function, like in the pure bliss, like it's one.
You can call it like that, pure emunah. You can call it emunah, but here we're not even putting emunah inside. It's taking emunah completely out of the picture. This class is not about emunah even. It's about simplicity of how we perceive our world. And if we're simple of how we digest our world, we'll come to simple conclusions very quickly. Of emunah. Ken Tzadika. Tzadika Mechila, we did not hear anything. Tmimut. Simple. Like we say, Arba banim leTorah. There are 4 children in the Torah, and there is the Chacham. You could connect it to that, maybe. There are many tefillot in Rosh Hashanah where we mention this concept of Hashem, hear our voices when we were children. Or even we talk about im kebanim, kavadim. We talk about this concept of being like children to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So yes, maybe you could connect. It's a very good tzadikah. Kol hakavod.
Like understanding that this is the call and what goes forward was not
What does the Rasha do? Asks questions and this, and tries to be smart. So don't be the Rasha and you're fine. Tam, he doesn't know. Another derech lishol. Tam is good. Another derech lishol. The Rasha is the one that asked all these smart Yanu questions. Ken, is there any other question? Ken or Michael?
Can we ask Rabbi Moshe to clarify something a little bit? We said earlier, and we know that this is that Yaakov Ish Tav Yoshev Oalim.
Tam.
That he was the timimut and completeness and simplicity, and he walked in the path of Hashem. We also know in different scenarios in the Torah, and the Gemara explains, for example, by Rivka coming to him and telling him to go get the brachot.
Rivka is a good example that we actually wrote when we wrote this Chidush down. Rivka was 3 years old. It says she was 3 years old. Why did it say 3 years old? Maybe you can say that she had that tmimut as a 3-year-old. Maybe you can say that that's why she was chosen by Yitzchak. There's so many examples where we can bring. Chavod?
And so, for example, Rivka tells him to get the brachot. Also later by Lavan, it says in the Gemara, we learned that Yaakov tells Rachel that he was equal in trickery. And also later on, when he leaves Lavan's house by Esav, it says, he tells Esav, go to Har Seir, he's going to meet him there, and he never does. So, if we're not going to say it's trickery, and we know that Yaakov was B'tmimut Hashem, how do we say that based on his information and his knowledge of his people, he was able to respond to them accordingly while still being B'tmimut?
So there are 2 answers to give on this manner. First of all, Yaakov, in his essence, had within him Chesed and Gvura. So as we know, if you look at the Sefirot, you have Chesed, Gvura, and then Tiferet is the reunion of both of them. So Chesed and Gvura, they both send their attribute to the middle, and in the core, that mixture of Chesed and Gvura creates Tiferet. That's why we say that Yaakov, Abraham, and Yitzchak were born for Yaakov, not actually born for Yaakov, but they were created in their attributes in order for Yaakov to exist from the first place. So naturally, Yaakov has a Gvura side. This concept of like strength, Gvura you can call it, which Esav comes from the Gvura. Gvura is red, Edom is Adam. Esav was Adam, was red. That's one. And the teaching that we always mention whenever we feel that we have to do very, very unique things to fight people. It's like one time we had a discussion with somebody about whether or not we should do food on Shabbat or not. If we should do food or we should not do food. To do food on Shabbat or not. Food. So some would say no, it's the shul, it's not a restaurant. And then some said, you have to bring the people, and after you bring the people, they'll come for tefillah too. So the famous Zohar mentions why was Yaakov the only one able to fight Esav. Why Yaakov is the one that, till today, it's Israel, Bnei Israel fighting Esav. It's always Yaakov, it's Israel fighting Esav. Why Israel? Why not Abraham? Why not Yitzchak? So, the Zohar HaKadosh says, because very, very simple reason. It goes back to what we just mentioned a moment ago. Avraham is chesed. Only good. Esav will take advantage in a moment of that goodness and finish it. Yitzchak is the exact opposite. It's gvura, complete strength. But that strength, he can cause that strength to even be its own destruction. So even the strength of complete din, Esav can take over. He was able to fight. He was able to overcome. And clearly we saw that he was able to fool Yitzchak. Yaakov had something special. He had that mixture. So Zohar HaKadosh says Yaakov was chosen because he knew that whenever he needed to fight Esav, he knew how to be sly like him. Which is he would mitakem ba'ukmiut de Esav. He would bend in the curves of Esav. He wouldn't change his actual reality, but he would change his, bend himself like him. So if Esav was fighting on a specific level, Yaakov went to that level and fought him there. Esav went high to try to have an advantage. Yaakov didn't stay in his place. He went up to that place, eye to Esav, and he fought him face to face. That's how we need to fight Esav. That's how we need to fight Yitzhak. We have to fight him at whatever level he's fighting us. He's fighting us in reality, we fight him in reality. He's fighting us in our mind, we fight him in our mind. He's fighting in our heart, we fight him in our hearts. That's why we were chosen, Bnei Israel, Bnei Yitzchak, Bnei Avraham, because we have this ability to fight Esav in his own akmiyut, in his own flexibility, or in his own demented shape, you can call it, or his environment, or whatever it was. So that was the secret of Yaakov.
That he was able to.
He was able to curve like Esav when he needed to.
But still keeping his tefillin.
Ma?
Still keeping his tefillin.
Still keeping his tefillin, of course.
How does he balance that? How does he keep his tefillin while still bending?
It's not for no reason we call Yaakov Tiferet. We have Avraham, Chesed. His Chesed is already self-explanatory of what it is. Chesed, Avraham. What is Chesed? It's Chesed. Yitzchak, it's Sfira of Gvura. What is Gvura? It's Gvura. Yaakov, what is Yaakov? Tiferet. It's Tiferet. Tiferet, it's not Chesed, it's not Gvura, it's Torah. How did you get to Torah? Tiferet is Torah now suddenly. Well, in the Torah there is always the secret. It says when HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world said, I don't understand, how are you going to create man that are going to fall against Yetzirah? Yetzirah is made out of fire, man is made out of flesh and blood. So Hashem said, Na'aseh Adam, we will make man. I'm not making man on my own. I'm making man together with something else. Who's we? Na'aseh Adam, plural. It's Bereshit. Na'aseh Adam, we make man. Who's we? Who was Adam making man with? So that's what HaKadosh says, with the Torah. And that's what we say, that the Torah was a tavlil la-Yetzirah. HaKadosh Baruch created Yetzirah, he created a spice to it. What's the spice? It's Yaakov. What's Yaakov? It's Tiferet, which is the main force that can fight Yetzirah.